about what's going to happen the closer we get to November about COVID. The one thing that we actually have power over immediately is to kind of deal with the anxiety level around voting. It is through the roof. I've never seen so many Black voters who vote all the time, being so anxious. So there are a lot of lawsuits floating around in Pennsylvania. They are starting to be resolved. As you said, the ballots are starting to be mailed. The one thing that we have to know is, and my family votes is focused on providing information. And that is our greatest tool. If you know how the system works, especially mail-in ballots, you will be less afraid because it's actually a way for you to track it all the way from when you put it in the mailbox and then they get it, you will get a notice. Actually, from the beginning, when they receive it, you will get a notice. But you can go online and there's an application, and people who don't have access have friends who have access. You pick it up on your phone, all they need is your birth date, and it'll say, this is where your ballot is. And so friends of mine are like, Emma, you're gonna mail your ballot? I'm like, yes. I gave myself time because I applied in May to get ballots all throughout the year, and I know I can track it. And I think that's one of the big keys right now that people have to realize, that there are tons of safety nets built into mail-in voting. But there are other options that are going to come online soon, and I don't want to say too much about them because they're not like polished, but just to let people know that there are going to be probably other options to vote, and just stay informed. So myfamilyvotes.com is a great resource because we stay on top of what's happening. We're on Facebook, but we'll make sure we have a resource for people who weren't on Facebook so they could land. And all of our information is vetted by the Board of Elections. So we're not just making it up, right? And so we need credible resources, and this is great tonight.
The world is actually looking at the Afro-Americans, seriously looking at them based on what has been happening. Actually, what has been happening with the activities of Black Lives Matter has sort of had tremendous impact on the rest of the world. In UK, it's going to have impact in my own life because just today, where I work, they are now there's a committee on race equality, all right?
Wow.
So the world is looking at the Black community. What are they going to do? Like I said, are they going to hold their destiny in their own hands, or do they want other people to decide for them? And COVID should not be a reason for them not to go out to exercise that political participation in this election.
A very important aspect in this election is the court system. We have the possibility of having an overwhelming Republican-led Supreme Court in addition to the local court systems, the state and local judicial system. When you look at the number of judges that have been appointed by this administration under the current president, I think the number is close to 300, and I think you may not even be able to count the number of Black judges on one hand, if there are any.
But we do live in a country where our government has a great deal of impact on our lives. And this election, I work with groups all across the country, and from Georgia, who has some of the worst voter suppression that I've ever seen, to Michigan, to a lot of other states. Activists are very worried about this election particularly because it does go beyond the president, that particular office, but the president appoints these federal judges, not just Supreme, but on the district level. And these district judges have so much power. I mean, these are the judges that they're ruling, like in New York, they ruled about which mail-in ballots were going to be counted. Like what were, like, was a signature, that didn't quite match. I mean, down to the nuanced levels in our lives, down to how, the federal judges heard case around Black women and our natural hair in the workplace, where they can just be fired. I mean, so it's really visceral. And the one thing about voting and Black votes, frequently we're called low information. And, you know, I've worked all over the country with all types of voters, including voters who lean toward Trump. Most voters do not know how the system really works. One thing I have found is when I do presentations in front of predominantly Black audiences, that they are particularly astute about the nuances of how policies impact their lives. But they may not know, or actions like, you know, different things that the police do, but they don't know those are actually policies, who controls those policies. And I think that's the responsibility of activists, MIDI people who have access to that information. So I do consider this the most important election of my lifetime, because anybody who has issues they care about, voting rights, access to health care, quality of health care, will all be impacted, not just in the next 4 years, but because these judges are being put in and they're lifetime appointments. So if they put a 30-year-old in, they're going to be around for probably a couple of lifetimes for some people, depending on where you are in the spectrum.
Millennials, if you notice, our athletes are starting to get involved and encouraging people to get involved. But based on some recent players meeting reports, only 20% of NBA basketball players have even registered to vote. And this is coming from their players meeting. We got to grab everybody within our midst, especially the young people, and teach them. We are an oral culture. So we need to tell the story about why it's important to get involved and why it's important to vote. When I saw that report that only 20% of NBA players were registered to vote, you know what? I wasn't even really surprised. You know, we have to teach and educate our young people, particularly. As a committee person in the 51st Ward, the super voters are the seniors and these women that vote every election. And you see them, they come in wheelchairs, they come in walkers, they come in canes, they come in all kinds of weather, and they vote, they vote, they vote, they vote. We need to get young people to understand why these super voters vote, because they understand. And we need to share those stories. We have to pass those oral traditions down to our young people. You know, we can look at the commercials. You know, people always use celebrities as a means to get messages out. But we need those reaction those people in our own communities to grab young people.
First and foremost, I'm very optimistic that they're going to come out because of what has been happening these days, right? We've seen that the millennials, most of the people that actually took part in or have been taking part in the Black Lives Matters fall into this age group. Most of them, I'm very sure of them. So definitely they are highly politically active right now. Their blood is actually very hot, it's boiling. And there's no better way to put it to practice to make life better than going out there to vote. What happened, and it is good, this movement started just before the election, and it's going to have a whole lot of impact on these people. And I tell you that BLM is also having impact on what we call the BAME. In UK, we call them BAME. We call ourselves BAME, the Black and Ethnic Minorities. That's Black, Asians, and so on. We're all coming under one group, BAME group, right? So what happened in America is actually going to affect the number of BAME voters in UK the same way we're expecting it to happen in America. Then another thing is the social media itself. The world is a global village. Whatever happens in Atlanta, everybody sees it immediately. So the injustices that have been going on, the oppression that has been going on, I'm very sure. My children, I've got 15 and 16, they are shocked. They never knew about this except if not because of social media. So today I tell you, although they're not yet that age to vote, but if they're with were to be an election today, they will go out to vote, and I know how they will vote because they have seen, they are shocked to see why is this happening. They are still very, very surprised. Why is it happening? Why will these people be treated this way? Of course, we face the same problem here in UK, all right? We face it, but social media is going to be a very great influence.
Some of the millennials are getting to be quite mature. They're not really that young anymore. So some of them are moving toward 40 at this point. So it's actually another generation underneath them that they're going to be first-time voters. I spoke before COVID hit and shut down all the colleges. I actually spoke to a group at Tramble University, and they invited me specifically to talk to them as millennials. And I told them, I'm talking to you as a voter, because the one thing in that video that you just showed, I can't remember the woman's name, she used a word, I'm going to use it, starts with a P, personal, right? Voting has to be personal. And it's not just younger people who are getting really just kind of disconnected from party politics. It's a lot of voters. It's voters in their 50s and 60s, because I get to talk to voters all up and down the age range. Everybody has to have at least one issue that they care about that will drive them to the poll. We cannot attach our hopes to a candidate anymore. All candidates have a flaw. If they've been in politics long enough, they voted on something that you just can't even imagine what they're thinking. And so one of the things is, I think when we talk to younger people particularly,
presently we will look at United States as adopting the policy of isolationism. They are actually Trump, or the present government, is all about America, 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 and not bothered about so much about the world. They're not engaging with the world. He's very much, I would say, more of a nationalist. That is, but that doesn't mean that it pays every sector of the American society. But the fact is, it's more of mercantile politics that I see being played out by Trump, by this present government, right? Because we in Europe is not happy. EU is not happy. UK may be happy. They have a partner he has a partner in Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister. But EU is not really happy because it's like he doesn't really care too much about EU. NATO, not much about NATO. That's why Turkey is having issues with Greece, and you don't see US coming so much forcefully in. And we have the policy, what we call the aggressive policy against China, but which we understand is about US jobs. So we are looking at it this way, and then about how it affects the black, the Afro-Americans also. The world, as I said, is watching, because whatever policy happens in the United States vis-a-vis the ethnic minorities or the Afro-Americans have a lot of impact on the rest of the world, especially the minorities or the black communities of Europe and South America or wherever, because the policies, the fallout of George Floyd's death is actually bringing a lot of changes here in UK. Streets where there are predominantly non-English people that are named after English people are now being considered to be changed. So many statues of slave owners in this part of the world has been torn down, and so on and so forth. So, with what I have studied, I've studied the policies of these two parties, their manifestos, and I can see that the Democratic Party is actually a party that wants to communicate or have relationship with the world, unlike the Republican Party that is being actually, I wouldn't say the Republican Party is much influenced by Trump himself more than the party's manifesto. I see it as Trump's manifesto rather than Republican Party manifesto. They have already left, virtually don't care about United Nations, the international organizations. They've already, it's what we call, he called it, they need to drain the globalist swamp by getting out of United Nations. And refugees, we talk about the refugees itself, whereby he said only immigrants that have got the means will be admitted into United States. But how does it impact on people who are fleeing who are fleeing political oppression? Where would they have such money to come into? To come to the United States. They have their obligation under United Nations Refugee Council and so on, UNICEF and whatever. And unfortunately, the policy of Trump or Republicans is definitely going to impact adversely on these people who are fleeing persecution, political persecution. Also, we talk about Africa, the motherland. Trump has no policy for Africa at all. Actually, he does not care if Africa exists. There is virtually no policy, and that is what the Democratic Party manifesto said, that they are going to change this narrative. They are going to bring a new policy towards Africa, because the problem is that Africa's population is growing, and out of Nigeria, they said, could be in the next by 2030, 2050, could be the third largest country in the world in terms of population, and there will be crisis of climate change, there will be crisis of conflict, there will be so many other crises. If we have a government that does not care for this, what is happening outside the shores of the United States, then what is going to happen? There will be catastrophe in the world. So we are looking forward to this. It affects us, and we are hoping that our Afro-Americans should please come out and vote en masse, because we know where they will vote. We know where most of their votes will be going to. And most of these votes will be too important to us, to the world, because we want an America that is with the world, not an America that has isolated itself. It's not going to be the right thing.